to come here. So folks who don't know me, as Sandy was saying, I actually grew up in Edmonds, up on the corner of 8th and Alder. Gwen's son Daryl and I played all the way from, I think, first grade Boys and Girls Club basketball together, all the way, or youth club basketball, all the way up through. I've known Gary, Gary and Joanne were longtime friends of my mom, and Joanne and my mom worked together a lot over the years, and went to school with at least the youngest of the three boys in the Nelson household, and it's just fun. And obviously, I went to school with Bob as well, Sandy's son. So it's fun for me to be back. Like I said, I grew up in the corner of 8th and Alder, lived just up in North Edmonds, just sort of closer to Browns Bay there off of Talbot Road. And I come out every, Sioux Charles say, with the Lions. I was a long-time Lions member, past president of the Lions. When I had moved up to Everett for a period of time, I dropped out of that, but I've been back putting up flags every holiday that we can, just because there's nothing better than seeing downtown Edmonds when we're doing our best. And that is when we've got the flags out, we've got parades, and everything's going on. So Edmonds is my home. It means a lot to me, and I'm really happy to be here speaking with you all today. A little bit of my background, obviously I went to the Edmonds High School, not Edmonds Woodway. I have to make it very clear, because back in the day it was a very heated rivalry between Edmonds and Woodway. And I was one of the last graduating classes. They tore down my school, so I don't know what that says about my graduating class. But it is, but graduated from Edmonds High School, went to, started at SPU, but had a scholarship at UW, graduated from the University of Washington, went to law school down at what was then the University of Puget Sound, but that was purchased during my first year. Literally, my classmates and I, we were sitting outside and the classes were canceled, and I was wondering what was going on, and I saw all the professors leading into the largest meeting room, and they had one of those little windows in the back door, so I walked up and I peer in the window, and I see this priest standing in front talking to everybody. I thought, oh my goodness, somebody's died. It was the law school that died. They literally, the next day, they took down the UPS sign and put up a Seattle U sign. So I graduated from Seattle University School of Law. My career has been in the public sector as a prosecutor. I started at the King County Prosecuting Attorney's Office when I first came out of law school in the Seattle District Court doing criminal prosecution. I was a contract DPA at the time, so I didn't come with benefits. And I needed benefits because my wife and I just got married, so I ended up at Kitsap County for a couple years. Took the Edmonds-Kingston ferry every morning. At first I thought it was going to be wonderful. I'll go up on the top deck and I'll have my coffee and we'll have this beautiful cruise across the bay. And then after about 3 weeks of that, it was you pull your car on, you recline your seat, you sneeze, sort of gentle nudging of the boat as you hit the other side, and then it was the hour commute down to Orchard. But then, the best thing that happened to me and my family was that there's no thing in Snohomish County. I was living here in Edmonds, just off of Walnut, renting a house, and I was able to shorten my commute and work in my backyard. And that was about 28 years ago. I've been at the Snohomish County Prosecutor's Office ever since then. I've been your elected prosecutor for about 3.5 years right now. This is my first term, and some of the stuff that we've done in my first term, so you kind of get a better understanding of the work that we do and how we do it. But I'm really proud of the people I work with. If you'd asked me, 6 years ago or so, like, hey, Cummings, you want to be, elected official or prosecutor? I said, are you out of your mind? I worked with Gary all those years. I know what these elected officials are like. But it was important to me to not have somebody come in who didn't know the ethos of the office, the work that we do, and the importance and the impact of the work that we do. And so when my predecessor said, I'm stepping down, I'm getting out of this business, and I couldn't find somebody else who wanted to do it, it was one of those voluntold situations. And I stepped up and ran. And I don't regret it for a moment. The work we do is hard, but it is meaningful and it impacts lives. Within my first term, we prosecuted 2 cases of individuals who killed law enforcement officers in line of duty, obtained successful prosecutions, held them accountable to the highest extent that the law allowed. We went after a bar owner in Everett who was using his operation to basically, drug and rape women. And we gave him I think the sentence ultimately handed down was one of the longest sentences we've ever seen outside of life sentence. He got about 111 years. He's down now in Oregon being prosecuted for crimes that he committed when he was a juvenile. one of my former DPAs, he retired, he's a great guy, Craig Rasmussen. Craig would say, you know what, science is cool. We used cold case DNA technology, and we were able to prosecute two extreme cold cases. Actually, one person had one homicide, the other was responsible for two. And it was because of genealogy testing and DNA that we were able to go and bring closure for families whose loved ones were lost decades ago. And one of them was particularly egregious because the person we prosecuted, he committed these crimes back in the 80s, it was late 70s, early 80s. And he had then been prosecuted for other crimes. We didn't know, nobody could link him to the crimes back then. He was then prosecuted for breaking in and sexually assaulting two sisters. And he ended up being convicted as a sexually violent predator and spent a good deal of time down at McNeil Island until the state decided to release him back into our community. When they released him back into the community, we were able to, and this is great, law enforcement does a fabulous job. They use the gum test. They had a couple people dress up with t-shirts of a fake gum company and knocked on the door and said, hey, we're doing samples. We like to have a thing. So we chew on the gum, spit it out, put it in the cup. They then took that cup, tested the DNA, and we linked them. This guy was the boogeyman. He was the one who randomly broke into women's homes and sexually assaulted and killed them. And we were able to hold him accountable. Now he will never step outside of a prison facility for the rest of his life. So these are some of the things that we do. And I don't take lightly the responsibility that we have. The decisions we make to charge somebody with a crime carries great weight. And the impact on victims, on witnesses in our community is important. And I am very proud of the work that my people do. So you know, the office is not just the criminal side of the office. In fact, I call myself a little bit of a unicorn. I actually grew up on the civil side of the office. So I spent many years advising Gary when he was on our county council. I represented all the elected officials. For about 17 years, I was the chief civil deputy, so I ran the entire civil sade of the office. Imagine any collective service law firm, that's what we do. We defend the county when it's sued, we review contracts, we review legislation, we do real estate transactions, all those types of things. Anything you would expect from Boeing, Microsoft, Snohomish County has a full legal team, and I, for many years, led that legal team. And we also have the Family Support Division. Family Support Division is one that people don't really know a lot about. The state of Washington contracts with my office to ensure that we establish paternity so we can identify who the parents are. Most importantly, it's the father, let's be honest, because we already know who the mom is. But we establish paternity and establish support orders so that the state and the federal government are not solely responsible for making sure that child support is going to that family. So then we establish support orders and we enforce those orders to make sure that the non-custodial parent is paying their fair share of the upbringing. And most of these cases come from families who are receiving some form of public assistance, TANF or other grants. So we're making sure that our tax dollars are being appropriately used and that these families are getting the dollars that they're entitled to get under our family law in the state of Washington. So those are sort of the three main areas of the work that we do in the office. We talk about governmental challenges and different things going on, particularly in the criminal realm. It is hard to be a prosecutor in the state of Washington. This year, so I've been in elected office 3.5 years or so. When I first came in, I was in the bottom third of the seniority list. Here I am 3.5 years later, I'm up to about the top third. That's because of the 39 prosecuting attorneys, several have said enough is enough and they're getting out. Great guy, Joe Brusick, he's the elected prosecutor in Yakima County. He finally said, it's not worth it anymore, I'm getting out. Joe's not of retirement age, he's going to go into private practice. But he's been someone who's just a great prosecuting attorney. And there's several colleagues from Joe in Yakima. We have Washington County, Rick up in Skagit just retired or is going to retire at the end of this term. So we've gone through, we're going to have a turnover by the end of this year of about 11 prosecutors. Wow. Elected prosecutors. Wow. That's a lot of seniority. And what are the reasons in that? Well, one, it is emotionally hard work. I am one of the first offices in the state to put together a secondary trauma program. So I literally are bringing counselors. It was interesting, law enforcement and firefighters recognized this a decade or more ago. about the impacts of when they're arriving on scenes and the things they see and the things they have to deal with. As prosecutors, well, prosecutors, we're in the courtroom. It happened, by the time it goes to trial, it's a year later or something like that. Yeah, no, it's not the same. Oh, no, it is the same. They're looking at the same body on camera. They're seeing the scenes. They're reviewing it. They're seeing the pictures. They're sitting down talking with victims or with the survivors of the homicide and the trauma that is secondarily imposed. I think it hit me hardest once. There's a case and it's still pending, so I can't talk too much about the facts of it, but a mother killed her toddler. It was a very savage killing, dumped the body down in Pierce County. And I literally came into work that morning and I was talking to the head of our Child Advocacy Center, Dawson Place, CAC up in Everett. Amazing facility. The work they do there is incredible, providing, it's a whole host. So the Child Advocacy Center model is one where we bring all the resources under one roof. So you have the forensic nurses from Providence, you have counselors, you have the sheriff's office, you have the prosecutor's office. So it's one-stop shopping. It used to be in the old days, if you had a child who was a victim of assault or sexual assault, they would have to report to the police, then they'd have to go to the hospital, then they'd have to go to the prosecutor's office, and they were having to drive all over. We've now put this under one roof and provide resources and effort for those families. So I was talking to the director of this facility after that case, and I realized I was in my office, and fortunately she was a certified counselor before she became the director of Dawson Places. I was a blubbering fool. It just hit me. I see lots of horrible things, but for some reason, I think this is the second child to be murdered by its mother in as many months, and it just crushed me. And I realized that these are the things that we deal with. They talk about attorneys having, attorneys and doctors are the two worst self-abusers. When you look at substance use and alcoholism and different things that are out there. And I realized that I'm sitting there in my office, beautiful view, huge sound in downtown Everett, crying like a fool. But it was because of the stuff we see. And so I brought in, Gwen's appreciating this as a counselor, so Gwen's like, okay, Jason, all right, you come by, we'll have a counseling session. But the work that we do, it just carries with us. And so I brought in a secondary trauma program so that everybody in my office, we start with large group meetings quarterly where they're helping people deal with identifying when you have this stress and how you're doing different things and how you work with it, to now small group sessions. So I had my special assault unit, my domestic violence unit, my violent crime unit. Each unit was able to come together and work directly with counselors and kind of deal with a lot of this stuff. It's tough because lawyers are tough. Now, we're human beings, and the stuff we see is not easy. And I'm proud that we started this program. I'm proud that we're having the conversations because it's helping us retain people. When I took over as the elected prosecutor, we had about, anywhere from 7 to 9 vacancies at any given point. It was really hard. We were in the wake of COVID, in the wake of a lot of new laws and changes as a result of George Floyd, a result of people not thinking the state was doing things that were right, and we were dealing with really hard stuff. Today, every one of my budgeted positions were filled. It was the first time in a long time that we filled everything. And I think part of that is because of the approach of taking care of the people who are doing really hard work. But the sad part about all this is that here we are in 2026. My staffing levels today are about the same as what it was in 2008. In 2008, my office had 200 FTEs throughout all the divisions. Today, I have 202, but the problem I've really got is I'm going backwards. That 202, I've actually having to hold. I just had some people leave for good reason, but I have to hold those positions open because of the upcoming budget. By the end of what's recommended in the executive budget, I'll be down to 185 total FTEs. So I haven't figured out when the last time is the office only had 185, but I think Gary was probably on the county council. It's been a while. And so when we are talking about the issues that we see in crime that we're dealing with, there's lots of conversation about we need to do more. I agree. The problem I'm running into is how can I do more when I have less bodies? And the cases we have take more time. Body cameras. I think they're the best thing ever. I review lots of cases where when I can see what's actually happening, I don't have to worry about what's being written in a report or what's being written. I still read the reports and the witness statements, but I can see it firsthand.
Nice.
The problem is, back in the day before there were body cameras, let's say we got a general, let's call it a burglary case. So law enforcement goes out, they take some witness statements, they write a report, they maybe take some pictures of evidence showing where the door was kicked in and the window was broken, list of items, inventory that was on. You could probably review one of those cases in maybe a couple hours, maybe less, but about 2 hours. You're just reading through the paper, making a determination of what your charging decision is going to be. Now we have all this body cam. Well, depending on how many officers show up, so let's say it's a burglary call again. Let's say you had about 4 deputies show up or 4 police officers show up on scene. Those 4 officers then have body cam rolling. They may be there for an hour or 2 hours, depending on the nature of the crime on the scene. We have to watch all that video for good reason. We want to make sure we're seeing everything that the officers saw at the time. So now, not only do I have the 2 hours worth of paper to review, but I've got anywhere from 4 to 8 hours worth of body cam footage that needs to be reviewed. So the review of those takes more time. And it's important that we do it because we want to make sure we're doing it right. But now you can see what used to be, you could review maybe 4 or 5 cases in a day. Now you're reviewing about 1 case in a day. So people talk about the backlogs and what's going on. And then you throw on top of that, and this probably gets me in trouble every now and then, there's this thing called the Public Defense Case Standards. Anybody heard of this discussion? So the Bar Association and the Supreme Court, which I was glad to hear Sandy talking about Supreme Court races, these are critical races. The decisions of the Supreme Court have had meaningful impacts on the work that we do. Well, they adopted caseload standards. It used to be, in fact, I argue, in fact, it's probably in front of you, Gary, long ago, the public defenders and prosecutors are doing the same work, but we should have some parity in salary. Because it's important to keep, we need good public defenders to be there with good prosecutors. That makes sure that we don't have ineffective assistance claims. So when we get a conviction, it stands up on appeal. It leads to just better trial work going on in the courtroom. So we argue we should have parity. Well, that was back when we were doing the same amount of work. Well, now there are these caseload standards that are going to reduce from what was about 150 felonies that a public defender can handle. When fully implemented, it's going to go down to about 47. So they're going to be doing handling a third of the work that my prosecutors are handling. Which means, like right now, just to give you an example, with the Involuntary Treatment Act cases, these are folks who are mentally ill and we're trying to put them into a facility to obtain treatment in an inpatient basis. There are 9 public defenders to my 1 deputy prosecutor.
Wow.
So just take that into context. So when we're talking about the resources and where are we spending our dollars and where are these things. Now, those 9 are there because of caseload standards. So they said, oh no, you can only handle up to 250 involuntary treatment act cases if you're a public defender. That means my deputy prosecutor is handling well over 2,000 cases to the 250 that each of these PDs are assigned to. Now the irony in all this is that, so when a hearing is going on, they do most of these hearings via Zoom now because we're at 5 different hospitals throughout the county. And so it's great sense. So, and I don't mind, I'd be fine if they had at least 5 public defenders. She had 1 in each of the facilities, and my deputy can do it from her office. But she's doing the hearing, and then you can see everybody attending. We've all seen Zoom. The only good thing, I guess, that came out of the pandemic was we learned how to use Zoom and can do meetings. You don't have to actually go in person everywhere now. So they see there's 1 PD doing the case against 1 prosecutor, and there's 7 or 8 others just watching. So, it's one of those things where we have an imbalance, and that's just in the context of ITAs. We're seeing it throughout in the criminal realm. And I, kind of ask the question or posit to you all, isn't it a little interesting that it only applies to public defenders? If you were a private criminal defense attorney, you see like the DUI heroes on the side of the bus, right? They can take as many cases as they feel they can handle. No limitations. Well, why is that? Well, they're making money and they're doing it the way they want to do it. So this is a constitutionally driven concept. Oh my goodness, you shouldn't handle more than this. But if they were to try to impose this on the private criminal defense bar, they'd lose their mind. They would never allow that to happen because then you're taking food off of their plate. So, I suggest to you that maybe we need to look in depth at the reasons why it happens in this situation. And to make matters worse, before the implementation of these caseload standards, and they're going to phase in over several years, but before, if you look at Yakima, if you look at Benton County, they already had a shortage of public defenders. And by that, I mean, nobody wanted, young graduates from law school who were interested in public defense, didn't want to go work in Yakima, or they didn't want to go work in the Tri-Cities. And as a result, they're already, if you can't give a person charged with a crime priority, the case can't move forward. And if the case can't move forward, you're running up against a speedy trial. If you're running up against a speedy trial, the court has no choice but then to dismiss the charges against this individual until an attorney can come in. And that means that that individual goes back out on the street. Benton County had a situation where not only did they have a crime against the individual they were charged, they couldn't assign the attorney. The guy was let loose, and then he went out and committed another crime. This is my fear of what we're going to be facing, because they've created what was effectively an imbalance. The system, and I believe they wanted to break it, but I think they're looking to break the system. So, for example, let's just assume we had unlimited money. We're a federal government, we can print dollar bills here at Snohomish County or in the state of Iowa. If you had all the money to pay for all, like tripling of the number of public defenders you needed, there aren't physically enough attorneys graduating from law school, passing the bar, who want to be public defenders to take on all that work if we reduce it down to 47. So that, to me, is the biggest crisis we're facing. How are we going to be, if I'm going to be still filing these cases, because frankly, at the end of the day, there are no caseload standards on prosecutors. We don't get to, the end of the month of August, say, oh, look, sorry, we reached our max limit. Go ahead and commit all the crimes you want, we won't get you until January. We don't get that choice. Somebody goes out and commits murder tomorrow, we're going to charge that case, whether we have enough or not. And in fact, sadly, right now, while I have, I would say roughly 15 senior DPAs who are qualified to individually handle homicide, I have 82 open homicide cases at various levels in my office. Just let that sink in a little bit. So while public defenders are getting these caseload standards, my people are doing even more. And it's super frustrating to me, it's super frustrating to prosecutors across the state. And I say this because it is important when we talk about who's on our Supreme Court, who's making rules, and who's having conversations about what this looks like. As we head into the next budget cycle, I have lots of concerns. I was just on a meeting yesterday. For the first time in my 28 years in the county, the law and justice partners are really collaborating. So the presiding judge of Superior Court, the presiding judge of District Court, the county clerk, the sheriff, and myself are meeting regularly. In fact, we had Nate Naring in yesterday, and we were talking with him about the crisis we're facing. Because if there's an imbalance, and we can talk for a long time about is it the executive or the council. I can tell you who it's not. It's not the prosecutor, it's not the sheriff, it's not the clerk, it's not the courts. We don't get to set the budget. We only can go in and advocate. We advocate to the executive, and they draft the budget, they give it to the council, we advocate to the council. But the imbalance that's there right now is one that has great risk. The budget proposed right now by the executive has a 3% cut. That's 4 more bodies for my office. 4 more DPAs. If there's a conversation about the law and justice, the public safety sales tax. This is the 1/10 of 1% of sales tax that I think the statistics show it's like $64 per household a year is what it will be. If that doesn't pass, then we're looking at about 11% cuts. That's a $3 million cut to my office. That is roughly 20 to 25 bodies in my office. It'll be a combination of attorneys, staff, and victim advocates. I'm not sure what crime I'm going to have to stop a prosecutor if we have a cut like that. And, I, along with my partners in the law and justice community, have been advocating to the executive's office and advocating to the council that, look, when times are great, I use the analogy when I go to the grocery store. When things are good, you always start with the milk, bread, and the eggs, eat your staples. When things are okay, then I can go down and get my gummy bears. I love gummy bears. That is my kryptonite. In fact, I have a giant bag of gummy worms in my next right now, or my bottle of wine, or whatever that may be. But when times aren't great, and I don't get my gummy bears, that hurts me, but I don't get them. It's nice to have. The presiding judge of the court said it best. If my husband loses his job, I don't look at my household finances and say, well, I'm gonna reduce my mortgage by 30%, my Netflix bill by 30%, my cable bill by 30%, my cell phone bill by 30%. I have to have my mortgage. That's a mandatory thing or I lose my house. So I have to get rid of Netflix, or I get rid of cable. And so we're having conversations with the council and executive about the importance of funding mandatory functions of county government before we get to discretionary or nice things to have. It's not that those programs aren't important. I think there's probably great programs that are in there, but are they carrying out mandatory duties that the state constitution, state law require of us? So we've been having a lot of those conversations. And I know this is a group that when you have your conversations, those are important aspects to you. When you look back to the original founding in county government in the state of Washington, we're talking about 1889. The county council members back then were called county commissioners, but they weren't just county commissioners, they were county road commissioners. Because the county was really, they did roads and they did public safety. So you had county commissioners that were county road commissioners, you had prosecutor, sheriff, you had your clerk, you had your treasurer, assessor, because the funds are being raised providing for public safety and roads. That's what county government was, that's really the basis of what government is about, right? We provide the infrastructure and the safety for people to thrive. So, when times are tough, we need to start having those hard conversations about what are mandatory and what are the things that we can do. So, we've been fighting hard as a law and justice community up at 3000 Rockefeller. It's a little bit like a soap opera, as I like to call it, like Melrose Place, but it's Rockefeller Place. But we fight hard up there every day to talk about the important issues that you all care about, public safety, about an infrastructure in place that makes sure that we can hold people accountable. Nothing is worse than the fear. I have a neighbor, we have golden retrievers that are about the same age. I think my golden is 18 months and Windsong for golden is 19 months, just a month older. And we run each other on our walks and we walk. I do my big loop that takes me down 76 to Olympic Drive all around the park then. And then we come back around the Talbot back on the loop. I saw her, we crisscross all the time. She goes to Parentville, turns around and come back. I said, well, you should do the loop, it's great. She says, I can't do it. I said, well, why? He said, well, a couple of years ago, my husband was walking down through OED on the park, and this crazy guy came out with a knife. And I just don't feel safe walking down. And I thought to myself, what a terrible place. I mean, I also checked, did we prosecute that? Oh, yeah, okay, good. But what a terrible place to be where you feel like you can't walk down on the sidewalk of OVD in Edmonds because you're afraid of what might come running out of the woods. For me, my concern has always been like the coyotes coming out of the woods. Yeah. Her concern is far more real. And it's not wrong for her to have that concern because it's her lived experience of what her husband went through. And so those are some of the things that I care a lot about. What can we do to make a difference in our community? And so we're working hard in that area. And I would encourage, and I know many of you are engaged in what's going on, I encourage you to stay engaged. It's important to be engaged. It's important to know what's going on. It's important to advocate. And finally, it's important to vote. As Sandy pointed out, it is crazy to me that we mail a ballot to every registered voter in Snohomish County. And you don't have to put a stamp on it. It's already got the stamp, or you can go to the ballot, whatever you want to do. Every single one. And we're high-fiving if we got a 36% turnout. Yeah. Are you kidding me?
That's terrible.
It is awful. And as prosecutor, I serve on a canvassing board, so I certify elections. In fact, I think Gary and I served together when you were chair for a period of time. It's one of the things we do. We serve and we certify the elections. We review and make sure everything's done. I have great confidence in the Snohomish County election system. Garth Bell's an amazing auditor. He does a great job. We have an election center that is like state of the art. And none of you have been up there. Now would be a great time because they're literally counting ballots today, right? It's up on the 3rd floor of the admin building, and it literally has a glass enclosure, so you can walk all the way around. You see everything from the time that ballot shows up, the opening, to separating the ballot from the secrecy sleeve, to all the way through being counted. You watch them match the signatures from what's on the outside of the ballot to what they have on top. It is state of the art, and it is amazing, and it should hopefully give you confidence that here in Snohomish County we're doing it right. It's a great honor and election system. But it's important to be engaged. It's important to vote. And how do we do this when we have such apathy? And that'll bring me sort of my last part. I want to make sure, Gary told me he has to leave by 9, and I don't want him not to be able to grill me on lots of questions. But what's important is, what my fear is today is apathy is happening. My worry is that it's the fringes that are prevailing. When people get to the point where they no longer want to vote, the middle, I call 80% of us agree on the same stuff. The problem is the 10% on the fringes. And it's the 10% on the fringes that are driving the conversations that are leading the primaries. I mean, we look what happens in some of the primaries in other states, and they're talking about why is this extreme candidate, I don't care what party, why is this extreme candidate getting in there? It's because the common, normal citizen who works hard every day to put food on their table and cares about the quality of life have gotten so fed up with politics that they don't want to vote. And that's now giving more power to the fringes in terms of the persons that they're nominating and electing, put on from the primary to the general. And so, one of the things I've been working on, I've been invited, I'm a fellow at the Rodell Institute, where they take elected officials from across the state. So there's 24 of us from various parties. There's another prosecutor, there's 7 or 8 people from the legislature, there's county clerk, county auditor, a bunch of mayors. So there's 24 of us. We get together and we're giving back to foundations of government and the ability to have dialogue and discourse, and remember that we can disagree and still break bread. And I think the problem we're running into in this day and age is there's too many people that if you're not 100% with me, then I don't want anything to do with you, and the split gets wider. We need to get back to the common sense. I loved, there was a time on our county council, and it was, Kirk, Gary, we had Robert Cawthorn, we had several folks that they had good, solid discussions on that county council, and they could disagree about things, but they still would go out to lunch. They would still get together. More importantly, they're still in their office Monday through Thursday, 8 to 5, available to you all to hear what you have to say. Fridays were out, they called it in the district days, where they would be meetings like this and going around to Rotary clubs and different things. But we need to get back to elected officials who want to get back out and engage with our citizens. Because once we lose that touch, and I fear that we see this way too much in Congress, you see people get elected, and when they got elected, they had the right reasons. They cared, they're talking to people, they were engaged. But once they get back in DC, it's now the lobbyists who are knocking on the door, who have the big checks. If you want to rise up in the ranks of a party, to be a whip or whatever it may be, well, how much money are you doing? You're dialing for dollars to ensure, well, you're not dialing your citizens, your constituents, you're dialing lobbyists. And now you're losing touch with the base, and that's my fear. And so I am very thankful to be here talking to you all. I'm very thankful for the engagement that you all bring, caring about what's going on in the community. So with that, I want to be mindful of time and say, what questions do you have? This is your chance. You can grill me. You can say all the Cummings, why aren't we doing more about this? And sadly, most of the time I'll say it's because they don't have enough bodies, but that's not a good excuse. Sue Charles.
Do you think it'll make any difference, the judges changing? Because it just seems like I personally know a case that is just being kicked down the road to the next date, to the next date, to the next date, to the next date, and nothing ever happens.
Yep. Couple things. Yes, choosing judges makes a difference. Just say it. Choose the judges that get elected from the Superior Court all the way to the Supreme Court make a difference. Secondary, our judicial system, as great as it is, and I do believe we have a very good judicial system in terms of, the rights of the accused, the burden on the prosecution. It's my job to make sure I prove a case. And if I can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, that's on me. But the problem we have is we were not built for a backlog that resulted when the courts shut down during COVID. So we had all these cases piling up and then more cases coming in. And that is something that the system was not prepared for. We tried to hire in more people to try to deal with it in short order. It was too hard to hire people during that period of time for a variety of reasons. And it was frustrating. So we're still working with a serious backlog, and we're having to prioritize. The worst thing to say is that we are not charging every crime that should be charged as a felony because of the limited resources that I have. So there are nonviolent felony crimes. So let's say it's a burglary too. So somebody goes into the grocery store, they steal the 6-pack of beer or the chicken or whatever it is, and they push the store clerk out of the way or the security guard out of the way, and then they run out of the store. That could be a felony. But with our standards right now, with the limitations always prioritize violent crimes against the person over these property crimes. We're telling the city now, please prosecute that as a theft case and a trespass case. And because I want to make sure that we're still focusing, like in our nonviolent trial teams, I'm going after those folks who have the unlawful possession of firearms. If you are willing to carry a firearm illegally in our community, something bad is going to happen. I don't want them to have it, so we focus on those cases. We focus on the eludes. In fact, we got an elude trial out of Edmonds going next week. And elude is a situation where somebody's literally fleeing from a law enforcement officer in a car. A marked police car with the lights going, and they're trying to get away and not get pulled over. Those are very dangerous. We see what happens when pursuits go bad. So if you're going to, flee from law enforcement officers who are trying to stop you, I want to make sure we're prosecuting those cases. We're going to always prosecute the violent crimes, the serious assaults, the sexual assault cases. We created a homicide major crimes unit for some of the most serious cases that we're seeing, particularly with increasing gang violence. So we're going to have to keep focusing on those with limited resources, which means some of those other cases, unfortunately, sometimes local vendors, they know the prosecutor, the state's case does not get better. It's not like a good French wine. It does not get better with time. It gets a lot worse. So they're incentivized to slow it down. So we have to sit there and constantly argue with the court saying, no, we're ready to go, we want to go. Victims have rights, the victim is ready to go, let's do this. But all the public defender has to say is the magic words of, well, Your Honor, if I proceed right now, be ineffective assistance, I need to interview 1, 2, 3 more people. And boom, it gets a continuance. It's super frustrating. It's frustrating for us, it's frustrating for the victims, it's frustrating for you all in society to see these cases languish on. Jason.
Yeah, I'm a former school board candidate from last election, and you ran the first 40 days interview you gave at Linwood Times. You said you're always going to prioritize violent crime, crimes against children, and sex crimes. And we have an article here in the Seattle Times, teacher accused of inappropriate touching, kept in class for 20 months. There is also Linwood Times article, Everett Herald article, and the prosecutor's office declined to charge Sibley. And in November 2025, the office allowed the district to start their own investigation. And he's been on payroll, not at work, since 2024 for 2 years now.
Wow.
So, how is that possible that the prosecutor's office allowed the district to do their own investigation? And could you explain to us why the office felt there was not enough evidence to prosecute this teacher? And I was working with the teachers that are in this article, and they're afraid that in September he's going to go back to teaching.
First of all, we reviewed a case. We have a burden to review these cases that come forward. Is there sufficient evidence to prove that the crime has been committed? In our review of that case, there was not sufficient evidence that we could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the crime had been committed. The school district was free to do whatever investigation they wanted. They wanted to not do anything until our review and determination was made. So that's the school district making a determination. They're going to put that person on paid administrative leave, leaving them in that position. Then they'll conduct their own. That's employment law between the school district and that teacher. The sad part that we have on some of these cases like that, and we've seen it in other jurisdictions as well, there is a fine line between being creepy and being a criminal in some of those instances. There are some teachers that reach a certain point where you're like, everybody else had red flags. Why didn't the administration do more to intervene and fire that teacher, saying, no, you shouldn't be engaging in that sort of thing. You shouldn't go into a room with a door closed without another person, without windows, blinds being open so that we can see what's going on there. But it's not a crime unless we can prove that something happened when they were in that room and something was going on in there. And that is the hardest part that we face, is that there are a lot of cases where there may be lots of smoke, but if there's no fire, we can't prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there's fire. As to the school district termination, I mean, I firmly believe when we see this in a lot of situations, it's like you as an employer can do what you need to do as soon as you have accusations and allegations and accusations involved. They chose to say, well, we're going to wait to see what happens here, and then we're going to go through our employment process. And I don't know enough about the Edmonds school districts, like the collective bargaining agreement with their teachers, say if this is something that was required to be done or not. I can't speak to the school district's policies, but I can say that it's extremely frustrating when you see someone sitting on paid administrative leave for that period of time, when there's enough that causes you, again, it may not be a crime, but is that the person in the classroom?
Could you just explain how the office came to that determination that there was not enough evidence?
We will review and all the evidence outlet with police investigation. We'll talk to victims, we'll talk to witnesses. Based on that information, we will review and make a determination whether or not we have a sufficient basis to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to enable us to charge a crime. That is our RPC and ethical obligations. We can't file cases that, well, we think maybe something happened. That's not allowed. We have to have a good faith belief beyond a reasonable doubt that the crime is.
Thank you.
See, so your hand go up.
Yes, thank you. I live in the Meadowdale area. In the high school, they have games now in that high school, and they were shooting in the park, just
Right next door?
right next door. And I know they want a police officer in there.
Yep.
Is that gonna happen?
I sure hope so. That unfortunately is not something I have any control over. That's an issue with the Edmonds School District and the school board. So, in fact, I just gave an interview to the Herald earlier this week, and it was about juvenile crime and the issues going on. And my office is a huge supporter of school resource officers. In fact, we've seen school districts and schools that have SROs on campus, we see fewer referrals to our juvenile court. You know, there's always a lot of people say, oh, no. If you put a school resource officer, it's just the classrooms, prison pipeline, it's a terrible way to do things. We actually see it being the exact opposite. What we're seeing is when an SRO is on that campus, they're engaged, they know what's going on. They're able to intervene earlier in a situation. They're able to handle it administratively within the school before we actually have a crime, that arises and occurs. Whereas when we see schools that don't have school resource officers, high schools that don't, we actually see more referrals, because then the principal's like, well, I'm just gonna call the police, they're gonna come and arrest this kid, they're gonna take him down to Denny. Where some of these things would have been handled if an SRO was on that campus in a much better way. And we are, my office and myself, I firmly believe that having SROs is absolutely an improvement, and it makes a difference. We saw what happened in Buffalo, where families and the students were basically begging, saying, please bring back school resource officers.
So what do we have to do? What do we want to do to get that to happen, Jason?
Well, that's talking to the school boards,
Right.
because they're the ones who are making the policy determinations. So before I get to you, and then I'll come to, all right.
Just a quick procedural thing. Public defenders.
Yes.
Are they county employees or are they members of like third-party advocacy groups?
Yes, so public defenders in Snohomish County, and it's different because in King and Pierce, they're actually county employees. Thank you. They actually have county departments of public defense. In Snohomish County, there's an Office of Public Defense, which is really works for the county executive. It's one attorney and several staff that screen individuals to make a determination of whether or not they're eligible for public defense. Don't get me started on that front, because we actually had a trooper that we discharged with harassment because he was stalking a former mistress. And he was booked into jail, and they appointed him a public defender, and he was on paid administrative leave from the Washington State Patrol. Like, he's making anyhow, so don't get me started on that part of it, but yes, so in Snohomish County, it's the Snohomish County Public Defenders Association is the large public defender group. They contracts with Snohomish County through our Office of Public Defense. But then we also contract with numerous other agencies who do conflict counsel or attorneys in the area. And to give you context, for example, the Public Defenders Association is only handling about 2/3 of our filed cases that my office handles. The other 1/3 are handled by conflict counsel or private attorneys. In fact, as part of the budget process, I said, if you want parity, if you're gonna, if you want parity out there, you're gonna have to add 36 more deputy prosecutors, so I can have the exact same number of deputy prosecutors as we are facing in the courtrooms, because we are 24 less prosecutors, public defenders from PDA, and then if you do that 1/3 of the other cases, that's another 12. So you have a follow.
So the association is a private organization?
It's a private nonprofit organization that contracts with the county.
And then, I had a third one that's not, sorry.
Well, when it comes back, raise your hand.
Jason, I know you've touched already on the fact that you guys' workload limits the total scope of what you'd like to prosecute, but in viewing what goes on particularly in Seattle, larger communities, Tacoma and stuff, where you see this constant, I want to call it revolving door of perpetrators coming in because there is such a lack of available prosecutors, court time, everything else. They're just slapped on the hand and released. What's going on in Snohomish County to counteract or eliminate or reduce that amount of, let's just get rid of the guys who broke the glass until they burned down the building?
Right. One of the things that we did a couple years ago was we prioritized. We basically said, who are our prolific offenders? Who are the ones that have several cases? And maybe they wouldn't have met that criteria for a charge, we would have sent it back to a municipal court. But if they've got a whole bunch, I like to say it's true in criminal law and it's true in employment law. 10% makes 90% of the work. So if anyone's been a boss, you know what I'm talking about. It's that 10% of the troublemaker employees or 90% of the work you have to deal with. Well, some of the criminals it's that way. So we wanted to focus on those folks. So we put their cases together, unified them under one deputy prosecutor so that they would handle those cases and move them forward. So we focused trying to address it from that perspective. In terms of what sentences may be handed out, we only get to make the recommendation to the court that ultimately imposes. I mean, we saw this recently on a juvenile offender who we charged as an adult on a gang-related shooting here in Linwood. And he was 15 at the time. And I believe that a 15-year-old brain is not the same as a 25-year-old brain, but we also believe that juvenile court was, having this person walk at age 21 without any consequences did not seem appropriate whatsoever. We charged him as an adult. But the court ended up doing, we were recommending a much higher sentence than the court imposed. But that's where all we can do is make a recommendation. That's when we talk about judicial reason to be in court. Jerry, I saw you raise your hand.
It raises a question. Is the prosecutor's office still pursuing deferred sentencing for certain crimes?
Yeah, we have a diversion tap program. And these were going to be like those first-time low-level offenders who were usually committing crime as a basis of a mental health disorder or a substance use disorder. These are great cases to be able to say, look, rather than put you in the traditional criminal prosecution, we're going to put you with a counselor. And you have to agree, you're going to have to say I did this, and then we're going to work with you on 18, 24 months of actual work dealing with the root causes of if it's a substance use disorder that got you in there, or if it's mental health to get you to that treatment. So we still have that. We also have the Adult Recovery Court, which is run by the Superior Court, where we take similar cases. The problem we're getting into, candidly, is we've had public defenders say, no, that's too much work. I'd rather leave my guy out and have him only have to do, 10 days in jail or something than have to do 18 months. And that is so short-sighted. Why do you not want your client to actually deal with that substance use disorder to get back in society in a productive way? And that's what the TAP diversion program or the adult recovery court, that's how those programs are focused on, is what can we do to break that cycle, because we're actually dealing with the root cause. They were going in and stealing the copper wire because they were trying to hawk it to be able to buy drugs. Well, why don't we deal with the drug addiction so they stop stealing and then have them get back? So those programs, Gary, are exactly what we still try to do. But the difficulty we have is if I can't be staffed enough to prosecute all those, so there's a fear by the public defender that they're going to be a hammer dropped on their client, then they are less incentivized. So we have this balancing act. I still have to, I'm always going to prosecute, the homicides, the rapes, the serious assaults. We just literally had a conviction last week of a drive-by where I think there was something like 38 rounds that were shot out. Guilty all across the board, but we're going to focus on those before we get to that lower level property crime, because I want somebody to feel like they can walk down, look at me drive through the park with their dog and feel safe. All right,
I remember.
came back.
Is there any kind of requirement in this county or anywhere in the state that private criminal defense attorneys have to do like pro bono work for public defense?
Sadly, no. There is an encouragement from the Washington State Bar Association that would say everyone who is a lawyer should figure out some pro bono, but there's no requirement to do pro bono. It's an interesting point you raise, because in Yakima and Benton County, where they were having the shortage, there was also the concept of saying, all right, I'm going to look around the courtroom. Hey, look, there's Attorney John Smith, who happens to be a family law lawyer, but guess what? You're now a criminal lawyer. I'm appointing you to this case. In the old days, if you were a lawyer, you were in the courtroom, you'd get appointed by the bench right then and there. You're not seeing that happen as much, primarily because it would be ineffective to put somebody who's never tried a criminal case and now you have a homicide. How can you do that? And I don't want to try a case against a lawyer who's ineffective to obtain a guilty verdict, to only have it reversed a year later, put that family through that trial all over again. That's the worst feeling ever. So, Mike, you have a question?
A couple of them. One is, how often does a good person look off a head?
How often is a good person? Well, it's interesting you say that. One of the things I get concerned about as the state continues to fund less for prosecution and less for law enforcement, my concern is individuals saying, I can't rely upon law enforcement to show up, so vigilante justice. We've had cases, and it's wrong. We had an individual who we charged because he saw someone breaking into his truck, and he went out and shot the individual breaking into his truck. You can't use deadly force on someone who's just stealing property. But this person, obviously we weren't able to interview him, he didn't right, but I surmise what's going through his mind is, I'm not waiting for the cops to show up, this is my stuff out there, and that's what happens. We're seeing cases like that. I don't want to say a lot of them, but that's my worry. When good people are forced into a situation because they have no faith in the system, it concerns me.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody's breaking into my house,
You have a right to defend yourself if someone's breaking your
I
house.
line up and call the trigger.
Yeah, but if you see someone break into your car in the street, you go out and shoot them, it's a different scenario.
Even if I put a bullet through his
Even then it would be assault, not homicide. Unless they let out.
He won't go far.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you had another question?
Yeah, it seems to me that to be a prosecuting attorney, you likely have to be a bit on the consumer side.
Potentially. I mean, I think what you have to, conservative, liberal, whatever you want, let me put it this way, nobody gets into the line of being a prosecuting attorney because they don't want to hold people accountable, they don't care about public safety. We have 39 county prosecutors in the state, and as I said, some of them are just getting burned out. But what's great is we get together 4 times a year as an elections meeting group. In fact, we got one coming up in September. And of the 39, on the issues that are involved in prosecuting attorneys, we agree on 98% of everything. And the 2% is nothing significant in terms of, it's usually an implementation thing. Like one county may say, I don't want to use a TAP diversion program, I'd rather just put it into a recovery board situation. So we are agreeing as prosecutors, Democrats, Republicans, and Independents on 98% of everything when we're talking about issues that face us for public safety.
Okay, now, because most, in my impression, is that most universities and law schools are extremely different.
I think that exists. I'm not gonna say it's not. I've been frustrated. I've heard that there's some law schools that are saying, don't be a prosecutor, go do really good stuff by being a public defender. The things that we do is we have enough internships and opportunities. We just, our summer internship program is wrapping up. We've got 5 soon-to-be someday lawyers. They're in law school right now. They come out and do Google online and do other internship opportunities. And what I like to show them is the actual work that we're doing, and that we're having a greater impact on folks who are disadvantaged. I mean, people want to talk about racial disparities. I submit to you that victims of crime have a disproportionate impact on persons of color. And they go, oh, you're just prosecuting. No, but when you particularly in a lot of violent crime, the gang violence that's out there, persons of color that are being killed. And they don't want to have that conversation, but when we point out, like, we're trying to get them services, these victims, we're also trying to get these people who have drug addiction to deal with the addiction so that they're not committing crimes and become productive members of society again. It opens their eyes. I remember it was a couple summers ago, we had one of our interns who was like, I didn't even know, they don't talk about this at law school, this is amazing, we're actually doing more to have a positive impact. So the public defenders are just like, win at all costs, I just want to get my client off, I just haven't served their time, and I don't want them to deal with the root cause of what led them here. And we're doing a lot of work trying to do that. So by communicating, by reaching out, and by having those conversations and getting those students in, they go back to their law schools and have conversations with their classmates like, hey, there's a great internship opportunity over the summer. You wouldn't believe the stuff that we're seeing and doing.
That's good. So I can assume that the majority of your prosecuting attorneys are from Columbia?
I I think the majority are probably from in-state law schools of UW or Seattle University, but yeah, it is always an interesting conversation of what's taking place with some colleges out there, so, yeah.
Maybe instead of using your wording of not having to fund, but maybe use equity or something like that, maybe not equitable, the parity.
Yeah.
Replace with the buzzword
Yeah.
they want is the certain political realm of people want nobody to go to prison.
It's funny you say that. The package I asked to add 36 prosecutors to match the defense bar that we're facing, I called it a public defender parity package.
Maybe equity needs to soften that.
Yeah.
The other thing, as far as finances go, you've got a county that has employee benefits that are off the charts for medical insurance, way overpriced, way richer than the market does. That's what I do for business. And then you've got pensions. So they whine, and then public unions, so they whine about their pay, but there's a public pension time bomb that the county has to keep funding for all those people on retired.
Yeah, when you look at
wants to uncork that.
Yeah, the county employees are part of the state retirement system, the
Yeah.
PERS, Public Employee Retirement System. I've not heard that there's any issue of the time law in terms of where the funding
The
is.
county has to pull money aside. for
Yeah,
those
and the
pensions.
employees, so county and employees both put a percentage into that, I'm aware of that. I have not heard that there's an outside, I was concerned when the legislature took money out of the LEV fund. It's the law enforcement firefighters fund, they pulled some dollars out because from their analysis, it was already sufficient. I mean, it's kind of like, people talk about social security, you know what social security is funded with? Our dollars. You know, people want to call it, oh, this is a gifting program, it's like, no, we all paid into social security. I look at my check every other week or every 2 weeks, whenever it is, and guess what? The government is taking that money out of my paycheck.
So Gary's thankful for that.
Yeah. So, so it is one of those interesting things, but with the state system, I do agree that there are some rich benefits out there, there's different plans that are going on. Obviously, it probably helps because the county has 2,400 employees, so you get a little bit, I don't know how much, this is your lane, not mine, I try to stay in my own swim lane, but that is a difficult thing. But the other thing we run into in Washington, for a very good reason, uniformed personnel, firefighters and law enforcement, are called, they have interest arbitration rights, meaning they're not allowed to strike. We can't let firefighters strike because if a building's on fire, we need someone to put that fire out. We can't let law enforcement officers strike because we need somebody, when you call 911, they need to answer the call. As a result, they get something called binding interest arbitration, meaning if you don't reach an agreement at the bargaining table, then you get to go to an arbitrator, and an arbitrator say, this is what you get. In Snohomish County, our DSA, our Deputy Sheriff's Association, has been fighting hard for a contract. And it's basically going to an impasse that will eventually go to an interest arbitration. In an interest arbitration, that arbitrator is sort of the neutral party that's going to say, okay, here's what your package is going to be on dollars and benefits, etc. That they usually look at comparables. So they'll look to Pierce County, they'll look to Multnomah. I don't know how we got. I'm trying. Gary, do you remember? It's like Pierce, Multnomah, Clark. There's a couple other counties that are sort of our comparator counties. So when Pierce County just gets a new contract, that becomes a new floor, right? Because you're not going to do worse than what Pierce County just got because it's sort of they looked at our back and forth. So there's a lot of that going on, but that also impacts. So because they can't strike, and then because that contract can just be imposed by an arbitrator upon the county and the DSA or the bargaining unit. It's one of those things that are out there. But that means that there's some costs within the salaries and benefit schemes that not even the county can control per se unless they've reached bargaining. Yeah. Jason.
Yeah, thanks for being here, by the way. We appreciate the opportunity to ask you questions. And there's another issue, that a local issue in Linwood. This made national news, that a mother had her 10-year-old daughter in the Linwood Rec Center, and in the women's changing room, the mom noticed that there was a man in there taking a shower with an erection. So we know that Washington State is pro-trans, and they have laws in place to protect trans people. But when does that protection draw? When do we draw the line and say okay, the trans people should be protected, but also young girls in a changing room should be protected, and they shouldn't have to see something like that. So isn't there a law like for indecent exposure that could be used in that situation versus protecting the trans person?
First, let me acknowledge, I don't know the actual facts from that. I heard the headline type of thing. I don't believe we've had a referral. I would like to know the actual facts, but yes, there is an indecent exposure law that may apply in that situation. But again, I don't know all the facts of that.
Okay.
It was at a swim meet. It was at a swim meet. I swim at
Well,
Linwood.
I understood that. I'm just saying that I don't know the factual situation of what this individual, how they got in there, what was going on. And I would hope that Linwood Police would be looking at it if they had
His
something
response
to refer.
was, I'm trans, it's
Well,
okay.
Yeah, well, that may be one's response.
His response.
Yeah, but it's up to the facts to actually be applied, not what some person says. And I would like law enforcement to at least be looking at that, and if there's a criminal referral that should come through. If it's just indecent exposure, that would go to the Linwood Prosecutor's Office, because it's a misdemeanor happening at that level. It's not, it does not rise to the level of felony. Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, Eric, time for one more question.
This is just a thank you and comment to you. So I work in the beverage sales industry, so I work with pretty much every business owner in Snohomish County, across the state as well. And thank you for you and your team for what you did at Anchor Pub. Because the staff work with a lot of our tutors, and that was a case that ran through our community.
Absolutely. In fact, I believe you, one of your distributor's daughters was one of our victims.
That is correct. And that owner is a real piece of shit.
Yeah. That's a very legal term.
We were very happy when the hammer came down.
I was very proud of the work that my team did. I was very proud of the work that the Everett Police Department, particularly Detective Lopetetti, who worked really hard, tirelessly. There was another detective who was involved that, when the report started coming out, said, something's not right here. And then started really working the case, started basically through social media, saying, hey, did something weird happen to you at Anchor Pub? Next thing you know, we start getting more information back, we were able to put together the case. Judge did a tremendous job. I was just telling Gary, she just retired, but that was definitely a signature case. She handled that case very well. It ended up being, at first we charged all of it at once. It broke into 4 different separate trials, about 4 or 5 victims in each trial. It was guilty across the board, like I said, well over 100 years of sentence. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So thank you all. I appreciate you having me down here. Hopefully it won't be 4 years before I come back. So invite us before then. I'm always happy to talk about more with you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.